Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson, and we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on commas. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English language arts. We're doing grade 8. And then we're going to scroll down up until we get to our chapter of commas. All right. So our chapter is commas. Our subject is English language arts. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of commas is commas with series, dates, and places. And commas with compound and complex sentences. All right. So when it comes to commas, right, we can use commas for a lot of things. Commas are even used to, like, you just to bring about the pause within a sentence, so that we don't go on and on and on and on. So it will bring about the pause within a sentence. We can add commas when we write down a series of things, series of dates, places, things that we like, things that we don't like. Then also when we, for example, write a compound sentence, right, then we need to add our, when we join our sentences, we join it with a comma as well as a conjunction. And then the same with a complex sentence. When we join our independent, or let's say, yeah, independent clause, then that is also when we need to use our commas. All right. So when we use commas, right, we need to use commas to separate three or more items within a series. Let's say, for example, you say, I like apples, oranges, pears, and right? Then it means that we need to use commas to separate those three or more items. Because you just say that I like, so if you're only going to say that I like apples and pears, right? Then we don't add our comma because, okay, you like apples and you like pears. Done. But if you're going to say, I like apples, comma, pears, and oranges, right? So now we need to add our commas over there. That is basically to separate our, like, something like a series of things that you like, for example. But you don't separate a comma when you say two things because it's only and But now if you make more than two things, right? Three or more, then we need to add a comma. So we add commas, we use the commas to separate three or more items within a series. And you need to put the comma after each item within that list, just like we did in that example. All right. And if we, for example, once again, we need to add a series or put a comma, sorry, after each item within the list, except for the last one, right? And there we have that example, except for this one. The last comma within the list, right before the coordinating conjunction, right, is called an Oxford comma within a series or a serial comma. The serial comma is sometimes considered optional, but most styles guide demand it. So some you don't need to add it, but with others you do, depending sometimes on the school, depending on the school that you're at, your teacher, or so on. Right? If they demand it, and then by all means you need to add it. But you don't have to. Like here in South Africa, we don't add a comma over here, right? So it really differs. It differs. And if we now look at an example, right? Like we made an example over here. If we look at another example of how we can separate three or more items within a series, right? Then here we have our example where it says red, white, and blue are colors of the American flag. So red, comma, white, comma, and blue are the colors of the American flag. All right. And as you can see, we just added a comma, and that is the commas that we use to separate three or more items within a series. right. So now expressions that consist of pairs of words such as thunder and lightning or lightning and thunder, as well as bread and butter, they are generally treated as a single item. And that is also, like I said, it's like you saying, I like apples and pears, right? We don't add a comma over there, right? And that is the same as, like we said here, with expressions. If we make, for example, expressions like lightning and thunder, we don't add a comma. Or bread and butter, yin and yang, white and black and white. We don't add it. We don't add a comma to it, right? Because those are expressions, and that consist of pairs of words. And those pairs of words are generally considered as single items. It is not a whole list of series of items, right? For example, if we look at this one, it says college costs typically include tuition, room and board, and textbooks. And if we look at, for example, like we said, pairs of words. Over here we have a pair of word because room and board is the same as you can either say room, you can either say boarding, you can either say lodging, but that is what room and board means. It's like a place where you're going to be staying. It's your lodging, it's your what is another word? Your accommodation. So tuition, accommodation, and textbooks. So instead of saying room and board, we can say accommodation because room and board means lodging, it means accommodation. And that is also a pair of words. And as you can see, we basically wrote a series of words, but we did not put a comma between room and board because that is considered as a single item, right? So room and board generally means accommodation. So we don't add a comma in between those ones. All right. And then if we continue, it says in dates. So now if we have dates also, right? If we need to write a date, it says in dates with a day and a year, we need to use a comma after the day, and we also use a comma after the year unless the date ends with a sentence. For example, January 1st, comma, 2001, comma, was the first day of the century. But if you're just going to write the date without all the other wording, then we're going to write, for example, today is September 30, comma, 2024. And there we add our comma. Only. No comma afterwards unless there is more words that is written afterwards. Then we add a comma. Mahatma Gandhi was born on October 2nd, comma, 1869. No other comma afterwards because there's no other words after. So we basically just add our period. All right. When we also name, so when the name of a city is used with the name of the state, of its state or country. So when the name of a city is used with the name of its state or country, we need to use a comma after the city. That is only if the name of the city is used with the name of its state. Now we put a comma or we use the comma after the city. Also, we need to use a comma after the state or country unless it ends the sentence. So if there's more words added afterwards, then of course we need to add a comma. But if not, we just need to end it with a period. And an example, right, where we add a city, state, and some other words thereafter. So here it says Chicago, comma, Illinois, comma, is known as the Windy City. So can you see we added a comma after the city? We added a comma after the state because there's more words that is added to whatever they're saying about the city as well as the state. But if we, for example, write the city and the state, but there's no other words afterwards, we need to end it with a period. For example, we've just booked our flight to Athens, comma, Greece, period. Right? So that is basically how we use commas. We use commas with series, we use commas with dates, we use commas with places, right? And we are now also going to find out still with in today's lesson how we can use commas with compound and complex sentences. But for now, we went over how we use commas with series, and we use a comma to separate three or more items within a series. We need to put a comma after each item in the list except for the last one. Then also expressions that consist of pairs of words, right? We need to treat that as a single word. So you don't have to put commas between the words because it is classified as a single word or a single item. Then commas within dates. We need to, for example, write the month, the day, comma, and then the year. If there's more other wording after the date, then we add a comma after the year. Places. When we, for example, write the city and in the state after, we need to write a comma after the city. And if there's more wording after the state, and then we also need to put a comma after the state. But if not, we just put a comma after the city, then the state, and then period. All right, so now we're going to aplusstudents.ca. We are once again going to go over commas with series and dates, dates and places, and then we're going to our test. And we literally went over all of these words, which is the commas with series, commas with pairs of words, commas with dates, and commas with places, cities, and states. We're now going to correct the text by inserting two commas, right? And here they say you need to note that in the skill, series commas are not optional. So we need to add our commas, right? I think the commas already added because here it says in 1900, comma, Carrie Nation, comma, an anti-alcohol crusader attacked a bar in Wichita, Kansas, and wound up in jail. That is basically the commas already. Oh yeah, after. Oh, we need to add a comma there and we add a comma there. That is our two commas. After the city, after the state. So after the city and after the state. All right, now let's go to our test where we're going to use commas with series, dates, and places. It says we need to correct the text by inserting one comma. It says Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, the classic story featuring Ebenezer Scrooge, was published on December 17, 1843. We need to correct the text by inserting one comma. Is it option 1 or option 2? Which one is correct? If you look at option 1 and option 2, you'll be able to see the differences of where a comma was added. So option 1, do we add a comma after the day of that date, or option 2, no comma? So which one is correct? And if we were to choose the correct option, we will choose option 1. We need to add our comma after the day when we, for example, write the date. All right. Now we need to correct the text by inserting two commas. Sorry. In 1900, Carrie Nation, an anti alcohol crusader, attacked a bar in Wichita, Kansas, and wound up in jail. Is our answer option 1, where we added a comma after Wichita as well as Kansas, or option 2, no comma? Which one is correct? Option 1 or option 2? And if we were to choose the correct option, we will choose option 1. We had to add the comma after the city as well as after the state. The next one says we need to correct the text by inserting two commas. Two commas. It says number 1, Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta, Georgia requires more than 8 million gallons of water for its animal habitats. So the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta, Georgia requires more than 8 million gallons of water for its animal habitats. We need to insert two commas. Is it option one, where we're going to add two commas, one after Atlanta, one after Georgia, or where we're going to add the options? Is that option one or option two? Which one is correct? So option one or option two? And if we were to choose the correct option, then we will go with option one. We need to add a comma after the city, and we need to add a comma after the state. All right, the next one says we need to correct the text by inserting two commas. It says to shoot successful nature photos. Olivia recommended using natural light, a tripod, and the camera's manual mode. So is it option one, where we add a comma after natural light and after a tripod, or what is our correct option? Option one or option two? All right, yes. And if we were to choose the correct option, then yes, option one, you're correct, is correct because we need to put a comma after natural light and a tripod. So well done. All right, let's do the last one. It says we need to correct the text by inserting two commas. Two commas. It says on September 30, 1964, the United States' first massive anti Vietnam War demonstration took place at the University of California, Berkeley. So, do we choose option one, where we add a comma after the day and after the year, or which option are we going to choose? Option one or option two? And if we were to choose the correct option, then we will go with option one. We need to put our comma after the day when it comes to the date and after the year. So after September 30, the day 1964, and the year. All right, so now we're going to our, so well done. Option one is correct. Well done. Now we're going to our next lesson, which is commas with compound and complex sentences. So commas with compound and complex sentences. All right. It says when it comes to a compound sentence, so in a compound sentence, we need to use a comma before the coordinating conjunction that joins the two independent clauses. So now you must know within a compound sentence, right? A compound sentence, it is two independent clauses that is joined by a coordinating conjunction. That's a compound sentence. It's like we have our two we have our two independent clauses that we are joined that is joined together using a coordinating conjunction. And coordinating conjunction, which is and, or, but, or so, right? That is a coordinating conjunction. If you join that to independent clauses, you get basically a compound sentence. All right. So in a compound sentence, once again, we use a comma before. Remember, you need to use the comma before the coordinating conjunction. And remember, I said a coordinating conjunction, it joins the two independent clauses. Independent clauses basically two sentences that is completed, right? So it joins the two independent clauses. And your coordinating conjunctions, right, are words like and, or, but, so these words is literally in the middle of these two independent clauses, and it joins that two sentences or two clauses to make one compound sentence, right? It joins that two independent clauses. All right. And if we look at an example, right, of a compound sentence, if we look at an example of a compound sentence, it says, we saw a flash of lightning. This is one sentence. We saw a flash of lightning. Before I get to the coordinating conjunction, this is our second independent clause. It says, seconds later, we heard the rumble of thunder. That is our two independent clauses. Now we need to join it by a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Now, here we have our coordinating conjunction, which is and. And that word and is used to join that two independent clauses and make it a one sentence, which is a compound sentence. And before we write the coordinating conjunction, this word, we need to add our comma. So our comma comes after the first independent clause, but it comes before we, for example, write our coordinating conjunction down. So that is a compound sentence. Then we have a complex sentence. And a complex sentence, right? In a complex sentence, if a dependent clause comes before an independent clause, we use a comma after the dependent clause. So if the dependent clause comes before an independent clause, then we use a comma after the dependent clause. A dependent clause is one that starts with a subordinating conjunction. So within a complex sentence, right? A complex sentence has a dependent clause. And a dependent clause, it starts with a subordinating conjunction, not a coordinating, a subordinating conjunction. And our words that are subordinating conjunctions are words like after, although, as, because, before, if, since, unless, until, when, or while. So basically, a complex sentence can start with one of those words. And if we look at an example, right, of a complex sentence, it says, if she ever gets the chance. Remember, there it starts with a subordinating conjunction. If she ever gets a chance, this is our dependent clause. So I'm going to put the dependent clause. And remember, we said after the dependent clause, we put our comma. So if she ever gets the chance, comma, Terry would love to visit the Egyptian pyramids, right? And that is basically compound sentences as well as complex sentences and how we can use it. And before we go to a test, a compound sentence, we use a comma before the coordinating conjunction that joins the two independent clauses. And remember, a compound sentence, it is two independent clauses that is joined by a conjunction. And before you write the conjunction, you're going to add a comma before the conjunction. Then we have a complex sentence, and a complex sentence is made up of a dependent clause as well as an independent clause. And a dependent clause, right, it starts with a subordinating conjunction, not a coordinating, a subordinating conjunction. And if our dependent clause, right, is the start of the sentence, then we need to, for example, write a dependent clause, add a comma afterwards, and then rewrite our independent clause. And like we said, a dependent clause starts with a subordinating conjunction, which is after, although, as, because, before, if, since, unless, until, when, or while. And that is a compound sentence as well as a complex sentence. All right, so now we're going to our test where we are going to use commas with compound and complex sentences. So we need to correct the text by inserting one comma. So now we need to see if it is a compound sentence or if it is a complex sentence, right? It says, Anvernd, or is it Arvind Mahankali finished third in the 2001 and 2012 Scripps National Spelling Bee competition, and he finished first in 2013. We need to insert the one comma. Just think of it, is that a compound sentence or is it a complex sentence? And we need to add our comma. Option 1 or option 2. Which one is correct? And if we were to choose the correct option, we would go with option 1 because this is a compound sentence, so we need to add our comma before our coordinating conjunction, which is and. All right, so the first one is correct. If you look at the next one, it says we need to correct the text by inserting one comma. It says if Ellie is named a finalist in the Bake Off, she'll win a trip to Nashville and a chance at the $1 million grand prize. So if we were to correct the text by inserting one comma, is it option 1 or option 2? And if we were to choose the correct option, we will choose option 1. This is a complex sentence. It starts with a subordinating conjunction, which is if, starts with our first, which is the dependent clause, followed by a comma, and then our independent clause. All right, so the first one is correct. All right, let's do one more. It says Tom may take up coaching after he retires from basketball, or he might simply spend more time with his family. We need to correct the text by inserting one comma. So is it option 1 or option 2? And if we were to choose the correct option, we will choose option 1, and that is a compound sentence. We need to put our comma before our coordinating conjunction. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on commas, right? And we did a series of commas. Remember where we add, if we have a series where we have three or more words within a series, then we need to add a comma after those words. We also need to add a comma by compound and complex sentences, right? Before our coordinating conjunction in a compound sentence, or after our dependent clause before we get our independent clause within a complex sentence. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on commas. Thank you very much, grade 8s, for joining the class and for interacting. And I really hope you're going to have a good evening further. Goodbye.